Any other question, please? Professor Avouleas.
After a question, but I will start with Herakles. Yes, probably I do. Even though I'm normally very loud. Congratulations to all of you for exceptionally stimulating presentations. Herakles, obviously, I enjoyed very much somebody like you explaining why markets fail. And lots of your good work has been dedicated to how to correct markets, one way or another. However, John Solston said yesterday, and Yiannis confirmed today, even though none of them clarified the criteria for the demarcation, that there should be a boundary in the areas where markets or a market-oriented approach is inappropriate and commoditization is harmful. Where do you stand on this?
So I'll take the questions.
Should I take one more question and then we...
Thank you very much. I'm Stephen Hockman. I'm chairing a panel on environmental justice tomorrow, so I'll be very brief indeed. But I did want to make this comment in response to the first question about shipping and the problem that arises when some actors, whether state actors or non-state actors in the world, adhere to standards of sustainability and others do not. And I just wanted to mention, and I'm going to expand on this tomorrow morning, and I suspect others will too, that it may be that what we need is new international legal institutions. I'm involved with a group of people who are promoting the idea of an international environmental court to which a country like Greece, which feels that its interests are being prejudiced by the sort of behavior that was being described, could bring a complaint, and an institution of that kind might be an answer, not the only answer, to the question that was asked. I apologize for preempting anything that the panel might have been going to say.
Thank you. Now I turn to the panel, Professor Polemarchakis, and then eventually we will come back to you.
To answer at all possible these questions, so it was very challenging. Now, as far as the shipping question is concerned, I don't have, I understand the problem. Now, what puzzles me is that when you talk about why, so I'm answering with a question, that's a bit of a Jesuit attitude, but I mean, as far as imports from China, let's say China versus Europe, why would this, I mean, the Chinese would have to pay the same duties, am I right? Because the Chinese products would have to cross into European waters when they come in, the same way that good European goods pay to exit Europe. So where is the, I mean, of course, it advantages trade between Japan, between China and Brazil, but between China and Europe, okay, but between them.
There is no environmental dumping protection.
That there is a trade between, say, East Coast South America and Mediterranean. And there is a trade between Mediterranean, between East Coast South America and China. There are competing markets. I mean, Europe competes in imports and exports, say, with certain Far Eastern destinations. If you are going to have levies or taxes on the leg which is linked to Europe, then European importers will have to pay more, and the exporters will have to bear the extra expense for the tax, which is not going to be the case for Chinese products or Indian to Brazil.
Yes, so yes, so I don't see how you can address this problem unless you go into this global. Yeah, exactly. So that I mean, yeah, and I think that's my answer also to the question. There, of course, would be enforceability. Am I right? What is going to force countries to go to this international environmental court? I mean, there must be some higher authority or whatever consensus for forcing countries to go there. Now, on the initiatives that are taken following the crisis, there are definitely, at the level of regulation, there is all sorts of, well, in the US, there is a regulatory reform. In Europe, there is. Now, if you're asking what the universities are doing in this respect, I think very little. So I think this is done mostly by administrators and regulators. I don't think that the academics, as I said, the academics have played a very minor role according to Yiannis, of course, that's fortunate. But as far as academic economists, not. But it is true that they've played a very limited role in around this crisis, even in terms of what is written in newspapers. One sees very little by academic economists. It's the exception rather than the rule. Now, as far as the way out of the crisis, the problem is that Greece is facing a double crisis, okay? Because there is the problem particular to Greece in the context of the international financial crisis, and I don't think that I would be in favor of stronger stimulus for the Greek economy, but apparently this is not feasible in an international context. There was stimulus in the US, there was stimulus in Europe, but stimulus requires borrowing, and that's exactly what Greece cannot do at this point. I think it is a mistake that it was not allowed to do it, but unfortunately we are not. So I don't think we had many options but do exactly what we are doing and try to work within the incredibly tight budget constraints that are imposed by the creditors and the IMF.
There is one more answer from there.
Yes, you probably can't hear me, so I'll just shout. That's it, you can hear me now, sorry. The principle that you talk about is called carbon leakage. And it's not just common to the shipping industry, it's been common to many industries, including the EU ETS scheme being applied to air traffic. I mean, you know that that's just been happening. The European Union has tried to deal with it, but not in a particularly effective way, because it has said that it's not going to increase its own targets by another 30% reduction unless they get an assurance that the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China, are going to come to the table and start talking about their own emission reduction quotas. So there are mechanisms afoot to try to deal with it, but they are not at the moment particularly effective. And there's a great debate about how you make that more effective happening now. And it's not just about shipping, it's about all kinds of industry. I'm dealing with some American clients who want to invest in the UK and they want to buy oil refineries. But there's kind of a bit of a question mark over that, because why is everyone selling up their oil refineries in the UK and moving abroad? You know, it's the same kind of question. It's exactly on point. The only other thing I would add is that the court that Stephen was talking about does have some foundation principles already enmeshed within Europe, because if you look at the REACH legislation, which many people should be familiar with, we have a central regulator, a European regulator, who will regulate member states within Europe to deal with the REACH regulations in a correct and proper way. So we do have a precedent that we can apply in relation to an international court of arbitration that would deal with some of the inequalities of carbon leakage that you talk about. I just offer that as a suggestion. Okay.
Sometimes when you don't have a legal hook that you can get your hands around immediately, sunshine is an enormous sanitizer. And, you know, I think we already know about the undervaluation of the Chinese currency. It's in the papers all the time. Now, whether that pressure will actually result in any significant movement remains to be seen. But, I mean, I think as a general theme, free riding on the environment or energy, you ought to receive much more attention in the press. And I think the more that can be made of that, the better. The long-term solution, I mean, when you realize that, for example, China uses 50% more energy to build a refrigerator than the US does. And it's not clear that WTO rules will allow a countervailing duty in that regard. But in any event, you know, who is America to complain? They use twice as much energy to produce a refrigerator than Europe does, right? So unless you have an international agreement to really begin to regularize the externalities. The free riding, classic free riding problem will continue. As I said at the beginning, the only way to change this is to have a constant barrage of examples being given of how free riding on the environment punishes the good companies that would like to be in compliance, and that we demand from our national governments concerted action to take care of some of this problem, because it has been ignored far too long, and the free ride problem continues.
Oh, good.
95%, not fully, but for 5%. No.
I want to start addressing the question from our host regarding shipping. Now, I suspect that if there was a European commissioner here, the answer you would get, not that I adopt it or embrace it, the answer you would probably get is something along the lines of Europe wants to lead by example, as you said, and that, you make the first move in order to incite similarly good behavior from others, and Europe being a purveyor and a repository of wisdom and goodness has this obligation in the world. You would get something along those lines. And of course the audience and the media would clap and applaud. But of course this would be an insult to common sense, because Europe is not a good guy. Those who live in glass houses should not throw stones at other people. We know very well that Europe, through its agricultural policy, common agricultural policy, is immiserating the third world. We know that Brazil, India, are suffering as a result of European policies, which are irrational, bad economic, in terms of their economics, and awful in terms of their environmental results. We know that piracy off the coast of Somalia was the result of dumping, illegal toxic dumping by Europeans in those seas, destroying the fish stock of those people in a failed state, and piracy began as a not legitimate but understandable reaction to what Europeans were doing. We know that, as you said, that there is a very eclectic, selective attitude. So you take what the European Commission seems to be doing is they're taking each sector separately and imposing taxation on some and not on others. If you are so smart and so good, start from the oil industry, start from the car industry, or, to be fair, start from all of them at once. But because of the ideologically driven market obsession with ETSs, you can't have an ETS for everyone. So you have to have an ETS for shipping, an ETS for bicycle manufacturers, an ETS for casinos, right? Which is madness. This is why I was suggesting before that however beautiful the idea of a market for bads, an artificial market for bads may sound, in practice, it is only going to create a massive coalition against any serious tackling of the problem. The flat carbon tax, on the other hand, can be imposed on everyone at once. And that is not something that you have a problem with, and this is something that the Chinese and the Brazilians would contemplate. What they would not contemplate is a European commissioner pointing the finger at them and saying, you have to have an ETS, when they know very well that this solves nothing and simply creates a new profit line for bankers and for Wall Street. Now, regarding what Professor Avoulas mentioned,